Today's presentation is Don't Hide Away, Destigmatizing Dementia with Memory Cafes. We will have a 20 to 30 minute presentation, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. It's my pleasure to introduce Beverly Cassidy and Andrew Sun. Dr. Beverly Cassidy is a geriatric psychiatrist and assistant professor at Dalhousie University, Department of Psychiatry. Her academic interests include the neurobiology of brain health, treatment of mood, anxiety, and cognitive disorders, and mental health social advocacy. She is the founder of Memory Cafe Nova Scotia, a provincial non-profit organisation dedicated to enriching social experiences and inclusions for persons living with dementia and their families. We have Andrew Sun joining us. He recently graduated from Dalhousie University with a degree in neuroscience and music. A musician from the Halifax region, he loves to perform piano and storytell through music, especially for those that cannot regularly attend public performances. This led him to found the Music and Healing Society of Dalhousie, where he led a group of Dalhousie students in organising concerts at hospitals and nursing long-term care homes for patients, families and healthcare workers. Furthermore, from his experience with volunteering at the Veterans Memorial Building, Andrew is passionate about working with older adults and advocating for stigma reduction surrounding dementia. He is a provincial outreach coordinator for the Memory Cafe Nova Scotia and will be performing at the Wolfville Memory Cafe event in December. So it's my pleasure to hand over to our presenters. Thank you.
So thank you, Claire, and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks also to Beth House behind the scenes for her help getting our presentation to you today, and to the Alzheimer's Society for the invitation to be here today. So our topic is Don't Hide Away. We're going to tell you a little bit about the work of the Memory Cafe Nova Scotia project. And although Andrew and I are presenting that today, really it represents the work of our whole team. We have about 20 very dedicated, mostly volunteers who help us in the Wolfville and Kentville, Annapolis Royal, Cape Breton regions, and also with the support of Seniors Mental Health at Dalhousie involved in the project. So thank you to all of those who participate with us. Regarding disclosures, we really don't have any commercial conflicts of interest to disclose. As Claire mentioned, this is a nonprofit social advocacy project designed to destigmatize dementia and increase social connection and support for persons living with dementia and for their families and caregivers. And we are supported also by grants from the Nova Scotia Rural Community Development Fund and the Mud Creek Rotary. So thank you very much for their support. So just to get us all thinking about this question of the emotional needs of persons living with dementia and for families and caregivers, what would you fear most if you received or have received a diagnosis of dementia? What do you or would you fear as a caregiver for a loved one with dementia? So just a moment to kind of reflect on that for yourself. And if you do have any thoughts that you'd like to share, please feel free to type them into the chat. And when we have some discussion time, it would be great to be thinking about that question of those emotional needs and how we might, as a community in Nova Scotia, be thinking about meeting some of the emotional needs more fully for our population today. I wanted to share these self-portraits with you. These are the work of a wonderful artist, Wilhelm Utermohlen, and he developed dementia and in these self-expressions really shows one of the most fundamental needs that we have, which is that need to continue to feel that we are seen, that we belong, and that we retain our identity, regardless of what illness may befall us. And so you can see this really poignant series of paintings that he did as his dementia progressed, trying to continue to reach out to us, to show us himself, and how he was able to try to convey his personhood to us. Here he is again in another, sitting in front of one of his paintings, and you can see this is a sort of social connection of an even more kind of intimate kind, where it's really about the social connection of family and friends. You can see his own self-portrait again, seated on the couch with the cat. And you can see there's a circle of people all around in this very warm room. Even in the mirror on top of the fireplace, you can see someone reflected, creating almost a complete sort of circle. And yet out on the left of this painting, you can kind of see this white area that's sort of encroaching on this scene of connection and warmth. And if we zoom out on that painting again, we can see that even more starkly, this sort of encroaching winter on that warm social connection. And I sometimes think that the branches on the trees look a little bit like neurons that are sort of losing some of their branching, as can happen in neuronal deterioration in Alzheimer's disease, for example. So the expressed needs of persons with dementia, the need to feel that they belong, the need for connection with others where they feel welcome, need for enjoyment and new experiences. And these needs are based on Dementia Roundtable responses from 1,200 participants who were asked these questions. So really not very different from the needs that any one of us might have with or without dementia, and also for caregivers and family members as well. And Andrew, maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit now about how Alzheimer's Cafe, the first actual memory cafe, started.
Sure. Thanks, Beverly, and thank you both, Beth and Claire, for the introduction. My name is Andrew. So the Memory Cafe was first founded by Dr. Beer Meesen, who was a Dutch psychologist, and the first one took place in 1997 in Leiden, Holland, so in the Netherlands. Dr. Meesen introduced the Memory Cafe concept as a way to break through the stigma associated with various forms of dementia. So as you can see from this image here, he has this big neon sign labeled Alzheimer's Cafe. So you know he wasn't fooling around, nor was he hiding around. He was quite serious about this. So here's a quote from Dr. Meesen addressing people with various forms of dementia and their caregivers when first launching the Memory Cafe concept. "Come out of the woodwork. You are part of society and we want you to take your part in it. Dementia is a part of life for some, for which nothing yet can be done. You didn't ask to get it. It could happen to anybody. Don't hide away." So today, it still holds true after almost 25 years later that the journey for finding a cure for Alzheimer's diseases continues. But now we know many new things that we can proactively do to enhance the quality of life for those living with Alzheimer's disease. This includes finding ways to increase social connection and feeling welcome in part and feeling welcome in and part of one's own community. So the concepts spread throughout Europe to Ireland and England, Australia, and eventually to the United States. As the Memory Cafe concept evolved, it grew into a very open culture, including more than just those living with various forms of dementia. So the Memory Cafe began in the Netherlands, but spread throughout the UK and now in Canada and the US. And just to speak in terms of New England alone in the United States, there are currently 114 cafes in the New England seaboard. And in Canada, we have a national Canadian network and website. In terms of Nova Scotia alone, we have 2 memory cafes so far. The one that started in Wolfville and Kentville about a year and a half ago, so almost 2 years ago. And we have plans to expand for Cape Breton, Annapolis, Digby regions for winter 2022. So the 3 main goals of the Memory Cafe are to create a welcoming community space for individuals and families living with memory challenges. So for example, in terms of music, music is stored in many deep layers of the brain. And so we use music within these sort of cafe settings to really help with sort of the motor cortex and the frontal lobe cortex of the brain. And so using music in these cafes it sort of really makes sense scientifically. Secondly, the second goal is to implement interactive activities designed to be inclusive and enjoyable for individuals living with dementia at any stage, as well as for friends, family members, and professional caregivers who attend the cafes. Thirdly, it's to reduce the social stigma and to develop age-friendly communities by hosting in social spaces in the community, such as cafes, community centers, churches, and recreational centers. The focus of these cafes is very much a social experience rather than a clinical one, although the leadership is very much clinically informed, especially with Dr. Cassidy at the helm. So here are some Canadian statistics for your reference. First is there are more than 500,000 people living with diagnosed dementia in Canada and more than 17,000 in Nova Scotia alone. Secondly, currently 28% of the Canadian population are providing care for their family members and are averaging anywhere from 11 and up to 40 hours a week of unpaid time. And from this, if caregivers were not providing care, this would account for approximately $36 to $73 billion a year in trying to care for those with diagnosed dementia. This highlights the importance of building relationships for caregivers and persons living with dementia. So this is where Memory Cafe Nova Scotia comes into play. Memory Cafe Nova Scotia is a nonprofit community-based initiative to promote social well-being and inclusion for persons with dementia and their families and caregivers. So here's our website, https://memorycafens.ca. And we also have multidisciplinary collaborators. So the Dalhousie University Department of Psychiatry, the municipalities in Nova Scotia, artists and musicians across rural Nova Scotia, local businesses, healthcare partners, and the Canadian Coalition for Seniors Mental Health. Oh, I think you might, there's just a slide right before this one. Oh, there you go, thank you. So this is what the homepage of the Memory Cafe Nova Scotia looks like online. The artwork you see was actually done by Holly Carr, a Nova Scotian artist who facilitated and led one of our interactive workshops titled What's in Your Boat? Each participant started with an empty boat on the water and painted things that they wanted in their boat along with Holly. So the content and images, they were all from stories from the Memory Cafe event itself. So the Memory Cafes are held once a month in a hybrid manner, so both virtual and in-person experiences. And they take place through the winter and spring. So last year in 2020 and this year as well in 2021, the first one will take place on December 7th, and will also take place for the 2021-2022 year. The live cafes are usually in a local cafe venue for locations at Wolfville, Kentville, Sydney, and Digby/Annapolis rural regions. And virtual cafes are conducted through Zoom software programming. Each cafe session features artwork to launch discussion surrounding a central theme and is accompanied by live or recorded musical performances and/or interactive art sessions, along with discussion and facilitation by facilitators of the Memory Cafe sessions. The reason why these sessions are so powerful can be linked back to the neurobiology of the brain that I was talking about earlier and its connection to music and art. Specifically with music, it's stored in many deep layers of the brain, whether it be with the motor cortex, so in the engagement of or perception of movement, the frontal cortex, so higher cognitive functioning such as executive control, memory, emotions, impulse control, problem solving, social interactions, and even the hippocampus, which is embedded deep in the temporal side of the brain and plays a major role in learning and memory. So there is good science as to why we would bring out music in this kind of setting, and also for art as well. So each cafe session is based around a central theme, and these themes are based on the expressed needs of persons living with dementia and caregivers. Here are 4 themes that we currently employ. So first is the need for stimulation. For this, we use the theme of new beginnings, so seasonal change with artwork and music. Secondly, it's the need for creativity. And the theme for this is imagination versus memory. And the artwork or the thematic art or music that we use is sort of these fantasy sea adventure and interactive art. Thirdly is the need for social connection. So reminiscence, the value of family and friends with musical guests. And finally is the need for acceptance. So dealing with loss, transitions and endings. And we use an interactive sculpting / clay session for this theme.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
So we wanted to give you all today a little bit of a taste of maybe what it would be like to be in a memory cafe. On the website, you will find this series. This was the series that we delivered last winter virtually. Those themes are the ones that Andrew just talked about. And so if you were at home, what we did to try to make it feel more cafe-like was to deliver Maud Lewis mugs to people's doors. And we invited them if they would like to have a treat from the local cafe. We also delivered those and asked people to get comfortable. And then we supported people to be able to get onto Zoom. And then we would share, for example, these art images in our first session. These are some beautiful paintings by a local artist, Arnaud Béguin. And just to invite each guest to take a look at which of the paintings they might want to be in. Which one do you like the best? And with those sorts of invitations, we get some really, interesting engagement around, some people really love that sort of hunkered down feeling of the snow that's sort of covered over like a blanket. And other people really like the vibrancy of a spring orchard and the blossoms coming out and that sort of more extroverted feel. So it just lent to some really interesting opening discussions about what we like and who we are. And then the second session featured fantasy. So using our imagination, even if our memory isn't great, we've still got lots of room for imagination. And these are some wonderful whimsical paintings that Holly Carr did and gave us permission to use. And these, again, which painting would you like to be in? So, the really adventurous ones in the crowd might have picked the upside down whale watching tour where the whale looks like he's the one doing the watching. And others wanted to be in the boat with the mermaid. And that led into some interactive art with Holly on the screen, and everyone had been delivered, for example, their own empty boat, the SS Memory Cafe. And so we would have a Zoom round table discussions about what we were going to put in the boat, who was in the boat, what mattered to us to put in our boats. And this is just the continuation of that session. So this is Holly painting her boat, which has in it items from people's stories, lilies, deer in the backyards, all sorts of features from the cafe members. And then our final session included a clay making session where we talked about transitions, creating something new from something else. And this was delivered by Elizabeth Sercom, who is a local sculptor here in the Annapolis Valley. And she was on the screen as well and guiding us through our clay making session. So we all were delivered balls of clay at home and some tools, simple tools to use with the clay. And then it was about treasures on the beach, what we might find on the beach. And so we made shells. And if we didn't like what we make, we rolled it back up in a ball and tried again. So it was really about the process rather than worrying about any kind of end product, but just engaging the clay and each other in that session. So how did all that go? Well, we had 29 respondents, 29 total respondents. We got 25 being able to reply to us. And mean age was about 74 years. 100% reported that they had increased sense of well-being after attending memory cafes, and 77% reported increased social connectedness, and that was over Zoom. So yeah, it certainly positive results to encourage us to continue exploring memory cafes. And these were some of the feedback that we got. I felt like I was on a date again with my wife. Thank you. I like the music. And also when we had our live cafes, we also got quite a lot of positive feedback from the hosts, the cafe owners. Our guests enjoyed the opportunity to have social interaction in a comfortable setting. And so, yeah, overall, we had a really positive experience with starting these and are this year hoping to expand them. If you are in a community and you think you would like to start a memory cafe, we do have a page on the website that's actually called Start a Cafe. And in that, you'll see a number of subheadings like what are the best practices for starting a memory cafe? And we'd really like to acknowledge the help of the Alzheimer's Society in developing those best practices as well. There's a guide for facilitating, registration forms, community resource links, and several different series that we've prepared and run that you could also use. So these are all free resources. There's no charge for anything that we create. You're welcome to use it all. And if you have a cafe setting in your community where you think it would be great to host something like this, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to help. We do have an upcoming series, which will be, again, a hybrid model that will be in Wolfville, Kentville area, Annapolis, Royal, Digby area, and in Cape Breton. And so we do have registration information available for anyone who might like to refer anyone or to join themselves. These are some of the links, the contacts for the different regions where we will be starting memory cafes beginning on December 7th. So if you want to take note of any of those emails, you're very welcome to write them down or to contact me at nshealth.ca. So I think that's everything for our presentation. And guess we'll hand that back over to Claire.
Thank you so much. Lots of great information there. And I know I've had the pleasure of attending a couple of the Memory Cafe sessions locally and saw firsthand the value in those. So thank you again, Beverly and Andrew. We've got lots to think about, and we do have some questions coming in from viewers. So if our viewers, while you're Yeah, just taking in all that great information. Please type any questions you have in the chat, and don't forget to press enter. So one of our first questions, Beverly, is Beverly and Andrew, where will the in-person cafes be held in Annapolis Valley and in Cape Breton this winter?
Yeah, the Wolfville, Kentville area cafe will be held in Charts Cafe, which is right in downtown Wolfville. In Annapolis Royal, it's going to be held at the Lazy Daisy Cafe. And in Sydney, it's going to be held at a Better Bite Cafe. And these will all be held simultaneously on December 7th with facilitators and live music on those sites. And so if you have anyone that you work with or that you think might benefit in those areas or surrounding areas, please feel free to direct them to us, and we'll make sure they can get registered in their area.
Fabulous, thank you. So with the in-person cafes, would it that there would be certain numbers, some restriction on the size of the group for the in-person?
Yeah, we generally try to cap it around 20 people, because of space and cafes, and also just even on a Zoom platform, it's really nice for everyone to have a chance to interact and comment on the paintings or the process. It's a way to really try to get to know people. So we do try to cap it, but if we end up with more than we could handle in one site, we'll certainly keep a waiting list and figure out perhaps how to have another site or something like that if we had a lot of people in one location.
Okay, sounds great. So we have another question coming in. How do you make the virtual cafes at home feel like a real cafe? And I know you mentioned the Maud Lewis cups and snacks, but yeah. So
yeah, it's hard. Zoom is really a new thing for us all. But we were surprised how well it actually worked. It is kind of fun to have something that kind of unites us all. So our municipalities actually were really generous in providing the funds for the Maud Lewis mugs for everyone. And so everyone would be holding up their mugs, and it was also fun because some people always wanted to order chocolate and some people always were lemon squares. And so, getting those things in person delivered was really enjoyable to do, and also enjoyable in the conversation in the cafe from week to week, because, it sort of became part of just the chat that we could have. And again, we kept the numbers relatively small so we could have those interactions. Yeah.
Excellent. Was there any cost involved in? Did you have some funding to cover those things?
Yeah, we've been really lucky. We've had tremendous support from our municipalities. So we started out with the town of Wolfville and the town of Kentville. So Nick Zamora and Ashley Sheffield in Wolfville and Kentville really got behind the idea of age-friendly communities, and they were the ones who first really helped us with in-kind support so that we could offer this for free. And then we've since received grant seed money from the Rotary Club and from community development funding for rural Nova Scotia. So it's been, again, a real collaboration.
That's great. I do have a question has come in about the stats captured from the cafes. It says, in your stats captured, of the 73% who reported an increased sense of social interaction, the other 27% reported no change, or what was their response?
Yeah, that was really interesting. The people who really didn't notice much change in their sense of social connection actually were caregivers who were actually already really well connected. So in a
Yeah.
way, that was a nice thing, that it was nice to see that there were some people who were coming who felt, yeah, this may have some benefit for my loved one, but for me, I'm actually feeling well enough connected in my community, which was a really, I think, a nice thing to see as well. But the majority of people weren't feeling that. So I think we do have a long way to go in terms of thinking about how we might creatively and sustainably address issues of social isolation. And I think particularly in rural communities in the wintertime, it can be really tricky. So the Zoom platform, as odd as it was, actually turned out to have some very good benefits in that way.
Yes, yes, we've found that too in the society, keeping people connected, and it's really made a difference to people. We have another question has come in, and it says, my mother is in a long-term care home. She is non-verbal and wheelchair bound. She loved music. Is she too sick to be involved?
Yeah, we have had some really interesting experiences last year, because we also offered memory cafes in assisted living and nursing home settings. And so a lot of the participants in those settings, particularly in the nursing home, did have significant cognitive difficulties and also mobility issues, and probably would not have been able to make it anywhere outside to a cafe. So the results were also very positive from those participants, that they really enjoyed being able to connect. And they also love music. And I think maybe Andrew, with his experiences in the Veterans building, might be able to comment on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So in the Veterans Memorial Building, there's a lot of a lot of different sort of, I guess, in terms of like a range of I guess people with different cognitive difficulties, and but for the most part, they all love having music there, and they just love having people around, I think. And in terms of my experiences, I actually started off as a meal assistant volunteer, but I found out that every floor had a piano there, and since I love piano, I asked the music therapist if I could play, and so that's how I got started, just playing music for them, and so this became an occurrence. And I think the Memory Cafe is great because it sort of brings a social aspect of trying to destigmatize, dementia and memory challenges. But for those who have, I guess, physical difficulties coming outside of nursing homes or long-term care homes, I think it's also a great idea to maybe bring the music or bring the art or the social facilitation to them too. So yeah.
Yeah, just to the point of someone who is nonverbal, that, because musical memory is stored in so many deep layers of the brain, that's why you could have someone who might not even remember or be able to articulate their child's name, but could still play the Moonlight Sonata.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a miracle when you see that sometimes, that someone who cannot verbally express themselves, but can suddenly play or will be singing or be able to tap in time to something they're clearly taking in music. It's because it is stored in so many deep layers that are, among the last layers that can be affected by something like Alzheimer's disease. So it's a very powerful way to capture what's still there. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We have another question. What has the experience been like for the volunteers, artists, and musicians? And I know you've touched on this, but maybe you could elaborate a little.
Well, it's a great question. Thank you for that question. Part of what we're hoping to do is, because it's multidisciplinary, that, beginning to understand the needs of people living with dementia is also for all of us across all parts of society to have more experience with understanding that and learning about it. So that's been a really interesting part of running memory cafes with municipal coordinators and cafe shop owners and artists and musicians who all have their own experiences now with, this population. And so we're hoping to capture some of that this year. Actually, we have a psychiatry resident working with us this year, Alex Wynot, and I think his project's going to be trying to capture some of those shifts in perceptions, some of the narratives and experiences of our volunteers as well, so that we get some quality assurance and feedback on that experience from both sides, both people providing cafes and also for people attending.
Okay. I have another question for you. Thank you. Did you say that you had people participating without dementia, or were they just people who happened to be at the cafe at the time?
Yeah, so this is a really, great question. The memory cafe itself, when they were live, like before COVID, we were running them all in person, in cafes, embedded right in cafes. So they were like between 2 and 3 on a Tuesday afternoon. So they were in part of a cafe. So the guests in our memory cafe were registered and were either persons living with dementia, either persons who are experiencing those sorts of problems, or their family members or caregivers. Or sometimes we would have members from the Alzheimer's Society or Caregivers Nova Scotia, or even physicians or other healthcare providers come to experience it, to see what it was about. But because it was embedded in the cafe, and because other people were just coming in and out of the cafe, they were also experiencing the memory cafe. So they would see the musician, or, we had a harp player at one time. And so everyone in the cafe was sort of mesmerized by this harp player. And so although it was its own thing, the memory cafe was embedded within the larger cafe. It was definitely wonderful to kind of see the ripple effect of people enjoying themselves in the memory cafe on the ambiance in the cafe itself. So those are some of the kinds of things that we hope to capture with our, feedback from cafe owners, for example, about what the impact is. But yeah, destigmatization and also just sharing of some of the cafe itself with non-memory cafe members was definitely part of the experience.
Thank you. Thanks. So I know you mentioned some long-term care homes getting involved and connecting. How would other organisations be able to attend memory cafes as guests? So I guess the virtual, maybe groups. What would be the best way for them to connect?
I think maybe just to email me, so we could have a conversation about what the specific setting is and the need, and we could figure out how to try to make something like that happen for a specific population. I think it's very doable in nursing homes and assisted living, because recreation therapists are usually right there. And so they are often looking for new ways to stimulate residents, to engage residents, and so if you've got a Cape Breton fiddle set, and that's lined up to participate in a memory cafe, that can be embedded right into programming for nursing homes or assisted living situations. And so we had tried that out last year, and it worked really well, because the recreation therapists are very skilled at managing Zoom and helping people to be able to hear properly and that kind of thing. So I do think it's quite workable, and certainly if anyone's interested in setting it up, please just feel free to email.
Thank you. So we have one more question that has come in, and this might be the final question. What would be the first step to get a memory cafe started in my community?
Yeah, I think the reason that we have spent a lot of time developing a website was because we wanted this to be not just something one-off that we could offer for a year or two. We really hoped that by creating a website with a bank of resources, that anyone in any rural community in Nova Scotia could go to the website and have musical performances, artwork, interactive video art sessions that they could use in their community. So the website would be my first thought. Take a look at the website, including the how do I start my own cafe page. And you really don't need a lot of resources to do it. It's pretty sustainable from that point of view. You really just need to, gather people who could benefit or be interested, and then have a green light cafe setting, and people can just come, and then you can use the resources from the website. All of the artwork is downloadable, so you can get PDFs, and this year we're laminating them so they can be wiped down and things like that to use in live cafes. So yeah, definitely check out the website resources. And of course, feel free to email us if you're interested to get one going. We'd love to. And that's the idea, is that this would be a spreadable resource and something to try to break isolation for people living with dementia.
Thank you so much. And I know Beth House has shared your email contact info and a link to the Memory Cafe website. So thank you, Beverly and Andrew, and for your thoughtful responses to the questions. So it's been a really great session, lots of good information, and I know there really is everything someone would need to get a cafe started in their area. So it would be great to see more and more of those popping up across the province. So yeah, and it was a great success. I know there really wasn't any trouble filling the spots of people that were interested and having that community connection.